We trust time to move forward, to carry us away from danger. 13 o'clock asks what happens when time itself betrays that promise. Greetings, schools, and welcome to a dive into horror television. Tonight we're exploring 13 o'clock from Friday the 13th, the series. We open to a pretty brutal scene. A man playing the saxophone gets tipped a $20 bill and then he's clonked on the head with a hammer. Ouch. The attacker, Henry, looks down at his stopwatch that glows. Henry goes down into the subway station, and when the clock strikes the top of the hour, time stops. We cut to Retha snooping around a drawer when her husband comes in and catches her with his stopwatch. Henry has presents for her. A platinum letter opener isn't what she had in mind, but there's another gift outside, a brand new car. I was kind of shook when he demanded that she call him daddy, but to each their own. We cut to Retha making out with Eric. She's having an affair and seems to love the guy. She knows about the magic stopwatch, but Eric doesn't believe it. Cops are pursuing Eric for real estate fraud as he cheated an old lady out of her house. Eric insists that she stay with Henry for financial reasons. She pawned the stuff that Henry gifted her and she hands the money she made over to Eric. It's not nearly enough to keep him out of jail. We go to the subway station where Micki and Ryan are watching a woman do cartwheels near the track. The performer, Sky, falls onto the tracks and Ryan rushes to save her. He barely gets out alive. Henry is walking down a dark alleyway when Retha comes up and surprises him. She admits this isn't the first time she's followed him. She saw him kill a man and use the watch. She asked to see the watch, and she knows how to work it. You have to kill someone and then go to the specific subway station at exactly 1 a.m. Then the time will stand still. As he pulls out his hammer to hit her, Retha stabs him once in the stomach and he falls. The performer from before sees everything and runs off terrified. Retha runs to the subway station at exactly 1 a.m. and time stops as expected. She steals a bracelet and starts shopping around for new stuff. Look at all the goods she just snagged. Sky tells her brother Johnny O about the murder she witnessed. She has no interest in telling the authorities. Back at the thrift shop, they're looking through a newspaper, and they learn about the robberies and the murder that happened last night. They assume some kind of cursed object is to blame, so they search the manifest. They sold the stopwatch to a man with the same last name as Henry, so the team goes to check up with his widow. Retha and Eric meet up and he's still stressing out about his court case. The woman he stole a house from seems to be recovering from her coma. Retha comes up with a plan to kill the lady plaguing Eric's conscience. Ryan and Micki arrive at Retha's house to ask about the antique stopwatch. Retha says she knows nothing about it, since she was only married to Henry for a month. They leave without any clues. That night, Retha is back in the city ready to kill. She meets an older man named Bob and lures him to somewhere discreet. Micki and Ryan meet the performer and Johnny O, but they're not going to talk. Micki leaves them a card in case they change their mind. Meanwhile, Retha and Bob start kissing before he's stabbed with a letter opener. On her way back to the subway station, Micki and Ryan spot Retha and chase her down. Ryan grabs her hand just as the time stops, so he isn't frozen in time. She whacks him and he falls onto the subway tracks and passes out. This gives Retha the chance to go to the hospital and kill the lady who could testify against her man. Ryan wakes up just before he's squished. The woman in the hospital flatlines. In the alleyway, Retha is there to stab Sky. Johnny and Sky run off before she can get her. Back at the thrift shop, they debrief about the weirdness that occurred tonight. They get a call from Johnny O and they're ready to talk. Micki treats Sky's wound and tries warming up to her. They have breakfast together. Sky tells them about the murder she witnessed. Then Ryan explains the stopwatch that stops time. They are all targets if they don't put a stop to Retha. So that night, the crew heads to the subway station and each of them plan to guard the entrances. A man drops dead thanks to Retha's letter opener. Retha and Eric take Sky down into the station without Micki noticing. Retha is waiting for time to stop so she can kill Sky without any witnesses. Sky runs into his subway and she's chased by the two goons. Ryan gets the idea to pull the emergency stop lever and then books it into the tunnel to try and save Sky. Ryan and Eric get in a fight and Ryan gets his head knocked in. The two goons have only a minute left before time stops, but only if they're in the subway station. Will they make it in time? Ryan's back on his feet chasing them. Ryan grabs the stopwatch just in the nick of time. Retha and Eric are frozen in time, but no one else is. Back at the thrift shop, everyone that works there is appreciative of Johnny O and Sky. Jack refers them to a youth shelter that can help them with clothes and whatever else they need. And that's where they leave us. The cursed stopwatch does not simply stop time, it redistributes power. In ordinary social life, time is a shared constraint. Everyone must act within it, negotiate within it, and suffer its consequences. When Retha gains the ability to step outside of time, she exits the social contract itself. The fantasy is not freedom, but unilateral control. While others are frozen, Retha is no longer accountable to reactions, resistance, or even recognition. Time's suspension becomes a suspension of reciprocity. Action without response is the purest form of domination. The episode suggests that morality depends less on intention and more on being embedded in a shared temporal reality. Once that shared reality dissolves, ethical behavior becomes optional. Retha's desire is not unusual. Comfort, security, love, admiration. What changes is the cost structure. When risk is removed, behavior escalates. The stopwatch removes all risk, legal, social, and emotional. Desire, once moderated by consequence, becomes extractive. People become interchangeable inputs into a goal-oriented system. This is rational behavior in a system where harm carries no penalty. The episode is clear-eyed about this. Retha does not lose control, she gains efficiency. Eric is one of the episode's most important figures because he never holds the weapon. Instead, he outsources harm. He encourages Retha to stay married for money, accepts stolen goods, and benefits from murder without performing it. This dynamic mirrors real-world moral displacement. Harm is easier to tolerate when someone else commits it. Psychologically, Eric maintains self-image by avoiding direct action while still enjoying the results. The episode subtly indicts this form of complicity as more corrosive than overt violence. Eric's hands are clean, but his dependency incentivizes escalation. Retha's crimes are in part performed on his behalf. Henry's relationship with Retha introduces a theme that carries forward even after his death. Domination framed as care. His gifts are extravagant but infantilizing. His demand to be called daddy is not erotic nuance so much as enforced hierarchy. This model of intimacy trains Retha to associate love with submission and reward. When she later wields the stopwatch, she replicates the same structure, only now she is the one in control. The episode implies that cycles of domination do not end with the death of the dominant figure. They are internalized, learned, and eventually reproduced. When the stopwatch stops time, the episode does something more unsettling than enabling murder. It removes personhood. The frozen figures Retha moves past are no longer social beings, they are inert matter. They cannot respond, resist, or even register what is happening to them. In that suspended state, the body becomes a prop, present, visible, and utterly unavailable as a subject. This is the moment where ethical relations collapse. Moral responsibility depends on recognition, the acknowledgement that the other is a conscious being who can be harmed. Once recognition is severed, harm becomes procedural rather than violent. Retha does not fight her victims, she does not persuade them, she simply uses them. Violence becomes quiet, efficient, and disturbingly administrative. This aligns with Hannah Arendt's insight that the most dangerous forms of evil are not fueled by hatred, but by thoughtlessness. In frozen time, there is no feedback loop. No scream, no reaction, no appeal. Without response, the act no longer feels like a violation. It feels like a task. The episode visualizes what Arendt warned against. Harm committed without emotional engagement is easier to justify, repeat, and escalate. Here, frozen bodies represent the ultimate endpoint of objectification. Objectification occurs when a person is treated as a thing, defined by usefulness rather than agency. In everyday life, this happens incrementally, through bureaucracy, exploitation, or dehumanizing language. The stopwatch simply completes the process. The victims are literally reduced to still objects in space, available for manipulation without consequence. What makes this especially chilling is that Retha does not initially behave like a sadist. She behaves like a consumer. She shops, she browses, she evaluates. The frozen city becomes a showroom of bodies and goods. This reframes violence not as emotional excess, but as a logical extension of acquisitive thinking. When people are no longer subjects, they become part of the environment. resources to be navigated rather than lives to be respected. The subway setting sharpens this critique. Public transit is a shared space designed for movement, encounter, and collective rhythm. Retha's power is not just over individuals, but over the social world itself. She moves while everyone else is locked in place, exposing how fragile social equality is when one person gains unilateral control. Sky and Johnny O's reluctance to speak is not framed as moral weakness. It reflects a social reality. Truth-telling is dangerous when you lack protection. Silence becomes a survival strategy, not a failure of character. The episode usefully avoids romanticizing whistleblowing. Instead, it shows that ethical action often requires safety, trust, and support, not just courage. Micki's success comes not from pressure, but from care. This frames morality as collective rather than individual. People act when they are not alone. Unlike many cursed object stories, the stopwatch doesn't compel evil. It amplifies what already exists. Instrumental thinking, moral shortcuts, dependency, and resentment. Ryan's brief immunity clarifies this point. He does not exploit frozen time for gain. This is not because he is pure, but because he remains oriented towards others as subjects rather than obstacles. The episode ultimately argues that power reveals ethical orientation rather than determines it. This episode is not about crime, greed, or supernatural mechanics. It is about what happens when desire is freed from consequence, when time stops being shared, and when power operates without resistance. Its bleak insight is this: morality is not a fixed trait. It is a fragile practice sustained by limits, relationships, and mutual vulnerability. Remove those, and even ordinary people can become efficient monsters, quietly, rationally, and without hesitation. This episode was written and directed by Rob Heaton, who you might recognize from his work on Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan, The Condemned, or Clockstoppers. Retha was played by Gwyneth Walsh, who you might know from Star Trek or Xenon Girl of the 21st Century. Eric was played by David Provol, who is known for Mean Streets and The Shawshank Redemption. Sky was played by Ingrid Venegar, who was in Godsend and her work as a producer. Johnny O was played by Jason Hopley. He worked on puppets in The Thing. Henry was played by Ron Hartman, who was in another episode of Friday the 13th, the series, as well as The Santa Claus from 1994. Overall, this was a solid episode. I'll rate it an 8 out of 10 for the show. It's one of the better written episodes. I want to know what you think down in the comments. I love hearing from you. And until next time, remember to be well and stay spooky.